I grew up in what you could call a loving home. Not because my parents were devoted to each other, but because they never stopped flaunting their twisted versions of affection in our family group chat. My mom would proudly send photos of herself passionately kissing her boy toy. My dad would clap back with wedding pictures of himself and the college girl he was sugar daddying. And yet, neither of them filed for divorce. They said they wanted to give me a complete home. But love like this doesn't stay buried forever. One day, everything changed. My mom's first love, long believed dead, suddenly came back. And almost at the same time, my dad's goddess, the one who had left him years ago, returned to the country. That's when the walls of our so-called happy family began to crack. Divorce was on the table, but neither of them was willing to give me up. In court, their obsession with me reached a breaking point. My mother pulled out a scalpel, swearing she'd sterilize herself if it meant proving her love. My father, my own father, brandished a pair of scissors, threatening to castrate himself just to show he was no less devoted. Their madness brought me to tears. It was around then that my grandmother stepped into the chaos. She caught us one afternoon, me reading picture books on the sofa, while my mom was wrapped up in the arms of her new flame, a man I called Uncle Ning. Furious, Grandma grabbed a phone and demanded my father rush over. But my mom didn't care. She kept flirting, laughing, acting as if none of it mattered. And so began the unraveling of our family's truth. Downstairs, my parents sat across from each other, their voices heavy with finality. My father broke the silence first. "Sophia's back. I have to give her a home." For the first time, my mother didn't laugh at him. She didn't mock or sneer. Instead, with tears in her eyes, she whispered, "Makoto didn't die. He's been undercover all these years, clinging to the thought of my love just to survive. I can't betray him." They both turned toward me. "Son," they began, almost in unison, before falling into silence. Then came the bargaining. My father spoke firmly. "Take all the shared assets. I'll keep our son. You're young. You can still have more children." But my mother fired back with her own vow. "I'll walk away with nothing. I'll pay you $200,000 a month in alimony. Just give me our son." Their eyes met with venom, and in one voice, they spat the same words. "Go dream somewhere else, scum." That was the turning point. Divorce wasn't just an idea anymore. It was war. I'd seen it building for years. My mom kissing her boy toy right in front of my dad, daring him to react. My dad staring at Sophia's photograph, whispering "I'm sorry" under his breath. Both threatening divorce, yet both retreating when the word custody appeared. Because they knew they weren't just fighting for freedom. They were fighting for me. And I didn't even know what I wanted. Deep down, I wished they'd stay together. But I couldn't ignore the truth. They didn't love each other anymore. My mom prayed at temples, wishing for my dad to die in a car crash. My dad encouraged her to try dangerous sports, hinting he'd take good care of me when she was gone. They both had lovers waiting outside these walls. With her boy toy, my mother softened, delicate and gentle. With my father, she turned venomous, unhinged. And my dad, every glance at Sophia was soaked in regret and longing. So I told myself, I can't be selfish. They love me in their own twisted ways. I have to let them go. But then came the questions. My dad, his voice trembling, asked me, "Son, if we divorce, and the judge asks you will stay with, who will you choose?" I looked him in the eyes and whispered, "I'll choose you, Dad." His tears fell instantly. He pulled me into his arms, and I clung to him. A father and son, bound by more than blood. Later, my mother asked the same. "Baby, will you choose to stay with me?" And just as quickly, I answered, "I'll stay with you, Mom. We'll never be apart." Her hands trembled as she wiped her tears, promising she would never let me go. Then came Makoto, my mother's so-called first love. He wasn't like the boy toy. He was taller, sharper, with a soldier's bearing but a warmth that disarmed me. He brought me gifts, played with me, and looked at my mom with a kind of devotion my father never did. "Don't worry," he told her. "I'll take care of you both from now on. No more missions. No more risks. You'll never suffer again." And then, to me, "Good son, call me Dad. I'm your father." When I left, I didn't know your mother was already carrying you." My chest tightened. I remembered the DNA test my grandmother made us take, me and my father. Again and again, the results were clear. But then I saw my mother's hopeful eyes, and I remembered how many times I had spoken to Makoto's tombstone, calling it Dad. And so I swallowed hard. "Dad," I said. Makoto's body shook as he cried. "You've been visiting my grave all these years," he whispered. "But from now on, I'll be here. I'll watch you grow." He and my mother embraced me, already dreaming aloud about the happy life they'd build together after the divorce. On the other side, my father introduced me to his goddess. Sophia was beautiful, gentle voice, warm smile, a fragrance that lingered. My father's eyes shone with desperate hope as he waited. And I crushed him with a single word. "Mom." Sophia placed her hand over his. "Don't worry, George. I'll take care of David. I'll be a good stepmother." And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just their son. I was the prize in a battle of broken loves and second chances. My dad leaned back with that proud smile of his, telling Aunt Sophia how lucky she was. "Being with me," he said, "means you get such a sensible son." At first, her arm froze around me, but she didn't speak. Then he went on, his tone almost casual, like he was talking about the weather. "Sophia, after we marry, I hope you'll get sterilized. I don't plan on having more children. I have only one son, and no one should ever compete with him for the inheritance." For a moment, even I felt a lump in my throat. That was my dad, so fiercely protective of me, so determined that I'd stand alone. He even added, as if to prove his devotion, "Of course, I'll do it too." Sophia's whole body went rigid. "You don't plan on having children in the future?" she asked. My dad's answer was steady, unwavering. "No. David is enough. Another child would threaten him, and I can't allow that." He wanted a family structure locked in stone, unchanged, one son, one heir, one path forward. And then came the comparison that cut deeper than he realized. He brought up my mom. His brows furrowed at the memory, though he quickly smoothed it over. When Willow was around, she stayed home to care for David, he said, before forcing a smile. "And look how well she raised him." Then he turned Sophia with a softer smile, as if he were offering her a gift. "After we marry, I don't want you working. I'd like you to focus on David. Maybe get certified in child psychology, childcare. Learn his courses inside out so you can tutor him. I know you can do it. You're quick, and I'll make sure you're taken care of financially." I remembered he once told my mom the same thing, that she should master piano, equestrian, golf, English, French, Spanish, all for me. She told him to get lost. Sophia, though, excused herself to the bathroom, and when she returned, she was no longer hesitant. She looked him in the eye and said, "For you, George, I'll do anything." My dad's face lit up with satisfaction. "The three of us," he said, "will have a very happy life together." I had no words. What followed was chaos, an endless divorce battle where my parents screamed and cursed more than they ever spoke. I sat at the piano, playing soft music to drown out their wars. Maria Diemul when they were calm, Croatian Rhapsody when the fighting returned. I couldn't join their arguments, but I could accompany them. In my own way, I kept us together, even if all we did as a family was fight. When my teacher asked me to draw my home, I couldn't pick just one. So I drew three. One with Mom, Uncle Makoto, and me. One with Dad, Mom, and me. And one with Dad, Sophia, and me. Rearranged, either Makoto or Sophia could give me another version of home. That drawing earned me the Best Creativity Award and a long, awkward parent-teacher meeting. At the end, my teacher hugged me and whispered, "Child, you suffered. If you ever feel wronged, come to me, I'll give you a home." I had no words then, either, just silence. The divorce made its way to court. Both of my parents cried, accused, and swore they'd do anything to keep me. My dad, in his dramatic way, even threatened self-castration with scissors. My mom, not to be outdone, pulled Makoto into the madness, declaring she'd marry him as proof of her devotion to me. And Makoto, dear, bewildered Makoto, closed his eyes, gritted his teeth, and said he'd follow through too if my dad did it first. The judge nearly dove under his desk. And yet, through it all, I just sat there watching these adults I called family swear away their futures, sacrifice their bodies, and drag others into the storm, all for me. The next day, they even agreed to show up at the hospital together to prove who meant it. And I couldn't help it. For the first time in a long time, I felt excited. To me, they didn't look pathetic. They looked brave. The car ride was heavy with silence. Even the driver, stealing glances in the rearview mirror, seemed to sense the tension. I lowered a little table, pretending to focus on my homework, secretly envying adults. They spent their days wrapped up in love and heartbreak, while I was stuck with French lessons and arithmetic. That summer, everything shifted. Makoto came to stay with us, and Aunt Sophia moved in too. Suddenly, the house was alive, filled with chatter and footsteps echoing down the hallways. But with more people under one roof came inevitable storms. One afternoon, I came downstairs to find chaos. My mom's hair was tangled from pulling, Aunt Sophia's cheek bore a red slap mark, and my dad stood with a bruise darkening across his jaw. In the middle of it all, Makoto shielded my mom, untouched, calm, like some legendary warrior stepping out of a story. My grandmother walked in at that exact moment. She nearly fainted, screaming at them to stop, but the fire had already been lit. When she discovered that both Makoto and Sophia were being lined up as possible remarriage candidates, she nearly lost her mind. The very next day, she dragged another woman into our home, a new contender for my father's heart. My mom, casually applying lipstick, smirked and told her, "You'll have to wait your turn. The first isn't divorced yet, and the second is just waiting for her shot." The woman didn't flinch. She simply said, "That's fine. Just tell me the conditions." Sophia, sipping her tea like it was a casual afternoon, deadpanned. The woman has to have her uterus removed, and the man has to self-castrate. The room fell silent. The woman's lips twitched. Then she bolted out the door. My grandmother, furious and trembling, pulled me into a corner and whispered venom about my mom. She warned me that if my parents divorced, my mother would forget me the moment she found a new man. But I stood tall and told her the truth. My mom had sworn to me I was her only child, and she'd even planned surgery to prove it. My dad, too, had sworn his loyalty, even if it meant sacrificing everything. My grandmother gasped, clutching her chest, before storming off with the nearest object she could grab, a French dictionary. She burst into my dad's study and began beating him with it, pages fluttering everywhere like white flags in a war no one wanted. I grabbed her leg, begging her to stop. She wailed that our family was cursed, that she had raised a fool of a son and a madwoman for a daughter-in-law. Tears filled my eyes until finally she collapsed into my arms, and we cried together. But the storm never cleared. My grandmother stayed, glaring at the four adults who turned our house into a battlefield. The fights grew more ridiculous by the day. When they weren't scheming, they were arguing. When they weren't arguing, they were brawling. And just when you thought things couldn't get any more outrageous, my grandmother stormed into the kitchen, knife in hand, declaring, "If anyone wants to cut something off, I'll do it myself." I stood beside her, puffing out my chest like a little assistant. My mom rolled her eyes, letting Makoto paint her toenails as if nothing had happened. My dad kept busy turning Sophia into a child care expert, as though training her for the war custody. And while the next court date loomed on the horizon, another date came sooner, my kindergarten parent-teacher meeting. My dad said to my mom, "You can't go like this. Look at that mark on your face." My mom shot back, "And you think your black eye looks any better?" That was my family. A storm wrapped in chaos, a comedy wrapped in tragedy. And somehow, in the middle of it all, life kept moving forward. Makoto used to sit with me, telling stories from his years undercover, lessons about loyalty and sacrifice, the kind that seep into your bones before you even realize it. Aunt Sophia, on the other hand, spoke of her years abroad, of distant skies and new perspectives, teaching me to see the world as something bigger than myself. Together, the two of them filled my days with laughter, games, and warmth, while my parents, already worn thin, struggled to keep up with me. My mother often said I was like a monkey that had suddenly gained wisdom, always brimming with energy, impossible to exhaust. An hour playing with me would leave her drained. My father had more stamina, but his time belonged mostly to work and to Sophia. Yet sometimes I caught glimpses of his private battles, like the night I saw his search history, asking if exhaustion could weaken a man. When I asked my mother what that meant, she mocked him, and he snapped back in anger, insisting it was only because he worked too hard. By then, my father was 37, already weathered, already tired, and I pitied them both, so I leaned more on Makoto and Aunt Sophia. We became a little trio, filling the house with our laughter. But every time I looked at our reflections in the tall glass windows, I felt a pang of confusion. Upstairs, my parents' room stood side by side, spacious yet heavy with tension. The divorce had turned them into rivals, each suspicious of the other. Neither would allow the other to spend too much time alone with me, as though I were a prize to be stolen away. So at night, they both lay beside me, guarding themselves. Meanwhile, Makoto and Sophia stayed on the third floor, watching it all unfold. Sophia was growing restless. One night, she turned to my father and asked plainly, "Are you really going to divorce?" His answer came quick, sharp, almost proud. "Don't insult me. Of course I am." She softened, telling him she knew how much he had suffered, and for a moment his defenses lowered. "All this suffering, for my son, it's worth it," he said. But Sophia pushed further. "If that's true, why still sleep beside your wife? Why follow her with your eyes wherever she goes?" He brushed it off with suspicion. "This is a critical time. If I let her out of my sight, she'll twist our son against me. I can't risk that." Then, almost irritated, he scolded Sophia for being too caught up in love and jealousy. "If you cared more about bonding with my son, would I have to do everything myself?" Sophia's eyes glistened. "I'll do my best to be a good mother to David," she whispered. Later, my father summarized it for me in the only way he knew how, by teaching me his brand of ruthless wisdom. If anyone blames you, never admit it. Push the fault on them. In this world, blood comes first, then money and power. Everything else is fleeting. When I asked him why he loved Sophia so much, he smiled faintly. "Loving her reminds me of my youth. And besides, loving her cost me nothing. I could love many women if I had the energy." It was a strange education, lessons in power, survival, and calculated affection. He told me if I ever faced someone crazy, I had to be crazier, because only then would they take me seriously. Winning wasn't guaranteed, he said, but at the very least, you'd force a draw. Meanwhile, Makoto was carrying his own secret weight. His gaze lingered on my mother longer than it should have, his eyes soft with a love he couldn't confess. One night, he finally asked her the question that had been burning inside him. "Willow, have you fallen for someone else?" She froze, startled, then quickly wrapped her arms around him. "Baby, what's wrong? Did I neglect you? Once all of this is over, the three of us can live happily together." Makoto's voice broke as he asked if she truly meant it, if she could really leave this life of luxury behind to suffer with him. My mother looked around our golden, extravagant villa, her lips curling in disdain. "This place is trash. I can't stand it another minute." But then my father appeared, his own sneer cutting through the air. "Some people like to have it both ways. They live here for years, and suddenly they can't stand it." My mother squared her shoulders, fire in her voice. "Who are you talking about?" His answer was cold. "Whoever reacts." The battle lines were drawn. That night, Makoto pulled my mother aside into the yard, and I trailed behind on my little bicycle. He told her it wasn't right. Two people divorcing shouldn't still share a bed. My mother frowned, torn. "You're right, but I can't stop tucking David in. What if he's misled when I'm not there?" Makoto crouched to my level, his voice gentle. "David, will you stay with both your mom and dad?" I nodded. I loved him. I loved Sophia. They were kind, and they filled the empty spaces my parents couldn't. Makoto smiled, turning to my mother. "See? He chooses us." But my mother's voice was softer, almost sad. "He says the same to his father." I quickly explained, "It's because I don't want either of you to be sad." For a moment, she looked at me as though I were far wiser than my years. "What a good, obedient son," she whispered. In the end, torn between guilt and fear, She sighed. Fine. If you're worried, Makoto, then come sleep with us too. And I stood there, confused, caught between them all, wondering what love, loyalty, and family were really supposed to mean. That night, after the nanny gave me a warm bath, I curled up in my giant 4-meter bed, smelling fresh and sweet. I was busy playing with my toes when Dad walked in. He slipped beside me, letting my head rest on his arm, and with that familiar smile he said, "Good son, let me tell you a story." I nodded eagerly, because in our house, stories were never just stories. My parents had a strange way of making me the hero, spinning tales where they were the ones who abandoned me, and somehow I still lived happily ever after. In Dad's version, he took me traveling the world. Mom? She'd fall for some young stranger we met on the road, leave us both behind, and Dad and I would go on, just the two of us. In Mom's stories, it was the opposite. Dad was the one who ran off, usually with an ice cream seller, and it was Mom and I against the world. Even as a kid, I didn't know whether to laugh or just stay silent. This time, Dad was mid-story, telling me how he and I once stumbled into a little town with red houses. He said I gave a beggar woman my steamed bun, kind and selfless, but then she had the nerve to pull out a QR code and demand money. Dad was fuming in the story, ready to argue, when he leaned closer and whispered dramatically, "Guess who that beggar was? Son." I didn't need to guess. In Dad's tales, the beggar was always Mom. And right on cue, Mom walked in, rolling her eyes. Just as Dad puffed up to keep going, she slid into bed, kissed my cheek, and, much to Dad's annoyance, invited Makoto to join her. Makoto smiled politely, laid down beside her, and the three of them stared at me like they were competing for who got to tuck me in. Dad's face darkened. With a low voice, he called Aunt Sophia into the room to replace him. Soon, it turned into chaos. Mom began her own story, this time about Dad turning into a monster who locked me in a castle. She and Makoto, now a knight on a dragon, stormed the fortress and saved me. I glanced at Dad. He had a timer running, 5 minutes each, no interruptions, just turns to attack each other through bedtime stories. Then Sophia joined in, lying beside Dad. Suddenly, 4 adults were squeezed onto my bed, all telling stories, all trying to win me over. I just stared at the ceiling, thinking, next time, when I draw my family portrait, I'll draw this scene. I'll definitely win the Creativity Award again. And just when things couldn't get any more crowded, Grandma walked in. She froze, horrified at the sight of everyone crammed into my bed. With a sharp voice, she scolded them. "The child needs to sleep. What are you all doing here?" For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Dad scrambled. Grandma raised a picture book like she was about to whack him, and even Makoto looked like he wanted to disappear. Eventually, Grandma laid down herself, insisting she be the one to read me the story. But later that night, when she left, Aunt Sophia slipped back. And from then on, my bed turned into a battleground, 4 adults and a child, with Grandma sometimes crashing in too, sleeping on the big sofa just to keep the peace. At school, it was the same. During parent-teacher activities, Mom and Dad could never agree. This time, though, they dragged Makoto and Aunt Sophia along too. To my surprise, it worked. Makoto handled the heavy lifting. Aunt Sophia took care of the delicate tasks, and for once, I actually won first place. Standing on stage with my prize, I beamed. The teacher hugged me tightly and whispered, "David, you've been through so much. Most kids don't even meet their biological parents until adulthood. But you've already found yours. And no matter what happens, I believe in you, because you've proven that your optimism can't be defeated." And in that moment, I believed it too. His adoptive parents stood to the side, smiling, quietly proud, quietly grateful. They loved him deeply, and in that moment, he felt it. He whispered, almost shyly, "Thank you, teacher." But soon after the applause faded, the questions began. Classmates circled around him, their voices rising like a storm. "David, where did you find your new dad and mom? Can I buy some too?" They laughed, half joking, half envious. Another chimed in, "Why do you get so many parents? It's not fair." And then the words turned sharper. "You guys don't get it. David's parents are going to sell him. Someone else scoffed, no, they're just getting divorced. That's how I got a stepdad and stepmom. Worst thing that ever happened to me. I hate them. The voices piled on, each kid projecting their own pain onto him. When your parents split, you can only choose one. At first, they promise nothing will change, but it always does. Adults lie. They always lie. Another boy tugged at his sleeve, desperate. David, come live with me. My mom says she wants to steal you away. My parents don't even like me. They just force me to study. But you can take my place. David froze. The room seemed to spin. That was the first moment he truly felt it, that his parents were going to separate. And once they did, one of them would disappear from his life forever. He went silent, unable to answer, the weight of it pressing down. Later, he tried to reason with himself. They deserve their own happiness. Mom with Makoto, Dad with Aunt Sophia. They should smile again, laugh again. But inside, his heart broke in two. He wanted them happy, but not apart. Never apart. Their arguments filled the house. Their tears spilled onto him. Their silence cut deeper than words. And when they finally took him to the hospital, the world went quiet. His ears refused to hear. His voice refused to rise. All he could do was cry for his mother, but when she reached for him, fear lashed out. He pushed her away, convinced she was leaving him. Convinced they both were. He thought of Dad, too, with Aunt Sophia and new children who'd never have to wonder if they were wanted. Adults always promise forever, and yet forever always cracked. In the end, it was Grandma who saved him. She held him close when the silence hurt most, her fierce eyes shielding him. He clung to her hand like a lifeline, refusing to let go even as sleep dragged him under. When he woke, his parents stood by the bed, broken and helpless. But he turned toward Grandma, the only safe place left. He packed his little yellow backpack, grabbed her hand, and pointed to the car. His choice was clear. He wasn't going home with them. Not anymore. Grandma's house was smaller, quieter, filled with flowers and a single loyal dog. After school, it was always her waiting at the gates. And though his parents sometimes came in secret, watching from a distance as he cried, he never ran to them again. He couldn't. Their happiness was out of reach, and so was his. Then one afternoon, as the sun stretched long over the alley, something magical happened. A Donald Duck pulling a tricycle. A little white rabbit with cotton candy on its shoulder. Characters from the stories his parents once told him had stepped into his world. At first, he hesitated. Were they like the adults? Just another lie? But Grandma lifted him onto the cart, sat beside him, and the fear melted. The tricycle carried him through flower-filled paths. The rabbit handed him candy, its sweetness dissolving on his tongue as a breeze kissed his cheeks. For a moment, he was the boy in the stories. Free, safe, happy, and yet night still brought questions. Why had his parents stopped coming? Did they already replace him with another child? Were they gone forever? And in the silence of Grandma's courtyard, he wondered, maybe adults really did lie. Maybe love wasn't forever. I once wrote to Grandma, I want to go home. She hesitated, then whispered something to Donald Duck, who turned and looked at me. I gave him the biggest smile I could manage. If my parents didn't want me, then fine. I'd follow Donald Duck, pull his cart, and find a way to take care of Grandma and myself. I'd be like a little cabbage in the field, unwanted, but still standing. The heat was unforgiving that day. A tiny fan dangled from the tricycle, blowing weakly in my face as we rattled down the road. I noticed how hunched Donald Duck looked, shoulders heavy, steps dragging. The little white rabbit was pushing from behind, trying to help. Worried, I scribbled to Grandma, let's take a taxi. They are too tired. She shook her head gently. They are not tired, she said. I opened my mouth in surprise. Maybe animals didn't get tired. I thought. I didn't understand. By the time we finally made it home, the sun was dipping low. But when we reached the door, something happened. Donald Duck suddenly collapsed. I panicked, screaming, Grandma, it's dying. She rushed over with the rabbit, and then pulled off Donald Duck's head. And there he was, my father. His face was flushed, his hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. He was gasping for air. Grandma quickly handed him water, while my world spun. I cried out, "Dad, don't die, please." My voice cracked, desperate, and then the rabbit pulled off its head go-to. Beneath it, my mother. She was just as exhausted, hair tangled, face red from heat. She had never looked so vulnerable before. I sobbed harder, clinging to her, terrified. Moments later, they both collapsed, rushed to the hospital. The doctors called it heat stroke. My parents lay side by side on hospital beds, whispering apologies to me, while I cried and whispered mine back. Grandma wept quietly in the corner. That night, I lay between them, their hands resting on my little belly, rising and falling with each breath. We spoke from the heart, saying how much we miss each other, how much we still loved one another. They promised me they would never divorce again, never tear this family apart. But deep down, I didn't want them to stay together out of guilt or sacrifice. I wanted them to be happy, truly happy, even if it wasn't with each other. My chest ached at the thought that maybe they didn't love me the way they once did. But I told myself I had to be strong. If the heroes in my stories could endure, then so could I. Time passed and things changed. My parents didn't fight in front of me anymore. Mom smiled at Dad when he came home early. Dad even picked out dresses for her, asking if they looked nice. He set his phone wallpaper to a photo of the three of us. It felt different, softer, but still there were cracks. Sophia auntie messaged Dad, asking where her place was. He replied, "In my heart." Mom, too, got a message from Makoto, asking if she still remembered their vows. She didn't answer. On my 6th birthday, I did something bold. I planned a surprise. After the party, I invited both Sophia and Makoto into our home. Grandma nearly fainted, but I looked at my parents and said with all the courage I could gather, "I want you to be happy. All of us. We can live together." My parents froze, stunned. Grandma scolded me gently, but her eyes softened too. And so, life took a strange turn. Suddenly, I had 2 moms and 2 dads. 3 homes. Nights filled with different stories, different voices. Dad and Sophia. Mom and Makoto. Slowly, they all found a rhythm, an odd but beautiful harmony. Dad and Makoto even went fishing together. Mom and Sophia shared makeup tips. From the outside, people thought my parents were perfect, a model couple who had somehow come back together. But for me, they were more than that. They were mine, my family, a little messy, a little unconventional, but full of love, and that, I thought, was priceless. The end.